Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking the Doctor Who episode In the Forest of the Night. And honestly, I can't say that I particularly cared for this episode. Getting into why, on these reviews before, I've said that the 11th Doctor was kind of intended to be sort of a fairy tale character. You know, the Raggedy Doctor, Amy Pond's imaginary friend, and all that other stuff. And that was, I think, a really good way of looking at the 11th Doctor, because a lot of stuff that they did with him didn't really make sense from a logical standpoint, but if you think of him as a character from a fairy tale, you know, the madman, the daft old man who stole a magic box, then it makes a lot more sense. Now, the 12th Doctor is about as far away from that as you can get. He's very reminiscent of the 3rd Doctor, very much kind of a man of science, if you will. But with this episode, we see what happens if we take that sort of doctor and throw him into what is basically a fairy tale. Yeah, I mean, like trying to look at what happens here with any sort of serious credence to actual science, or in a lot of cases, even basic logic. I mean, they just. All right. I mean, might as well just complain that, you can't turn that. It's impossible to turn a pumpkin into a coach. So, I accept that part of it. It's just that going that route, this episode ended up just making things kind of boring. I mean, it was sort of an interesting take. There was no real bad guy, yeah, and the Doctor kind of does go a little lesson about how fear less, trust more, which is a good lesson, but it just doesn't work. And not to go back too much on what I said about not applying too much logic to this. Again, you can only kind of go with it so far, because basically there's only so far you can really ask people to just sort of go with it. And this episode, to me, as a lot of things do when Stephen Moffat sometimes has a hand in them, is that it asks you to just sort of go with it a little too much. I mean, for example, the Doctor says, that this has happened before, and then he mentions the Tunguska event. And he even says, like, oh, people will forget about this. And like you said, he uses Tunguska as an example. Except that Tunguska, if you're not familiar with this is an enormous explosion that happened in the early 21st century in Russia, just flattened forest for like miles and miles around. I mean, it took like years for them to actually get an expedition out there to look at what had happened. It was such a remote part of Siberia, but I mean, the damage from that can still be seen today. And there's been numerous things in movies and TVs and documentaries and all this stuff. It's not something people forgot about. It's really well known, and with the most commonly accepted theory being that there was actually a small bit of antimatter that somehow collided with the Earth over there, and that was the cause of it. And then there's also the idea that if something like this were to happen, that within 5 minutes there wouldn't be a million posts about this on Facebook and on YouTube, and security cameras recording all of this. There's no damn way that people are just gonna forget about this, and to imply otherwise is just stupid. I mean, almost as stupid as the curious lack of cars on the streets of London. I mean, yes, there were a few. Somebody even online mentioned if you pay really close attention, you can see a bus with an advertisement for Doctor Who on it in the background. And again, the streets of London are mysteriously, empty. I mean, what happened to all the people who were just walking around London, going about their daily lives when this happened? All right, but anyway. So this episode also we get to see some more of Danny and Clara's relationship, and here Danny basically busts Clara for lying to him, but also kind of gets that why she did it, and he sees that she really does really truly value the time she spends with the Doctor a great deal. So I guess you could sort of say that the Doctor and Danny do kind of reach a little bit of a balance with each other here, with kind of the understanding, like, we don't like each other, but we both want Claire to be happy. And this is a fine situation because we've all been in that situation where you have a friend and you really hate someone else that they're friends with. So you just kind of have to, when you're around each other, give each other a lot of space. Now, I'll also give this episode credit for when they use all these kid actors. Now, when they use kids on TV, there's always a really tricky thing to do, simply because kids can get annoying very quickly. And believe me, I work in education, so I know that all quite well. But to give the show credit, they really used the kids in this episode well. I didn't find them annoying. They were, they weren't super well fleshed out characters, but I did like that the kids didn't really fall into the immediate stupidity things that kids always seem to do, and they weren't, they didn't become grating, and they were even a little bit charming at times. So, good for handling the kids well does earn the show some serious points. And there's also some nice imagery. I mean, obviously the whole thing with London being covered in a forest is really cool. Even going back to what I said about fairy tales, Maeve, the little girl, you see her, she's running around in a red coat, and of course there's also some big bad wolves running around. Again, laying it on a little bit thick, but okay. I know somebody kind of mentioned that they sort of thought that the tiger running around was maybe a little bit of a reference to the Jungle Book. I think that's kind of a silly idea, simply because, the Jungle Book is in a way kind of a fairy tale, but if anything, it sort of reminded me more of that poem, The Tiger, by William Blake, that we all probably had to read in high school. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, blah blah blah, your fearful symmetry and all that. Yeah, not to make light of that poem, it's actually a very, very good poem. But anyway, yeah, I honestly don't have a huge amount beyond that to say about this episode. It was an episode that had a few good moments, some nice elements to it, but mostly it was just a silly episode. Now, we do sort of amp things up with the inevitable confrontation with Missy coming next episode, and I'm really keen to see just what's going on with her, because it looks like it's going to be a good reveal. So yeah, guys, that's all I have for you this time around. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and of course you can follow me on Twitter @HoosierJedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.